Tim mentioned some things about legislation and PPA pricing that I just wanted to touch on before we start talking about the buy-sell agreement. There have been a couple of things recently that went on the federal level. One is the tax credit. When the corporate tax rate decreased to 20%, that actually made people's tax burden, they have less tax burden or less appetite for those tax credits. So that is affecting PPA pricing a little bit. So we've seen a little bit of a blip. We did have the tariffs come into place. The market had self-corrected for some of that, so we think we're going to be able to hold module pricing pretty steady over the next year, and then those tariffs will start decreasing. And then the other thing is that the 30% ITC is going to start going away next year, and that's another thing on the back end of that PPA pricing that kind of drives how low we can get. And when you're talking about that community solar 5.8 cent bogey, which is what we're going for in all of these projects, like that's the goal, to hit 5.8 cents, because then your project's going to sell out immediately. You know, all those financial factors are kind of circulating in the background, and one of the things that we do with our financing partners like Sol Systems there in the back is keep abreast of all of those changes and try and move numbers as we can, so we're constantly trying to get the best pricing. And the other thing about that kind of PPA price is that economies of scale has a very, very large effect on what your pricing is going to look like. So, you know, a 5 megawatt in Scottsbluff is going to have a very, very different PPA price than your 100 kW system somewhere else. One of the things we've talked about with Cliff, and we mentioned to NPPD last week, is that if we can start aggregating some communities together and bundling projects together, then we can take those as a package to a finance company and get better pricing for all of those communities. So as you're starting to think about timing and development, talk to each other and see how big your system size can be. Do we have something that maybe we can couple together? Are we close in location so there's not going to be a lot of mobilization between us? The more we can work together, the better we could get pricing for every community involved for the community solar project. So I wanted to mention that so you guys can start having some conversations as well. Okay, this is like way too fancy for me to figure out how to use. I'll look for here. So as Tim mentioned, there's really 3 different types of solar projects that you can do as a retail community. There's the net meter, which is anything under 25 kW, and that's going to be just a direct offset of a certain facility or a well facility. There's the buy-sell rider, which is going to be anything greater than that 25 kW. We like to keep those also under 500 kW because there's a whole different set of circumstances that you have to go through if you get into a project of that size, including different types of studies with NPPD, very intense studies with NPPD. And most facilities aren't going to use something of that size. The water treatment plant at Aurora was 480 kW AC. And we haven't, there's one water treatment plant I'm looking at on the eastern side of the state, which is pretty big. And to offset their usage, they're not an NPPD customer, but it would be about 7 megawatts just to offset their treatment plant. So if you have a really big factory or something, it's possible you would need that much solar to offset it, but generally we like to keep them in that mid-size range. And then the community solar. I always think of the buy-sell as the community's way to offset their own usage, and the community solar projects as a way to offer something to the people who live in your town. A lot of times those, especially if it's a smaller size community solar, you make that offering and it's bought up before the city even has a chance to buy shares. And if you're the municipality trying to offer that, you don't want to say, hey, no, you can't have that because I'm going to take half that energy. So we have had some municipalities who just haven't bought into their own programs because the system sizes aren't big enough. Kearney's big, and so they could take some of that energy as well. And I am working with a couple communities where we have a certain system size and we took all of their muni facilities and added those up, and we are going to carve off a piece of that solar system for the city to offset their usage, and then they're gonna sell the rest of the shares. So that is doable as well. It's just what you prefer as a municipality, and everybody's different, and everybody has end goals. So as you're thinking about projects, that's, you know, something that Cliff can help you with. Jeff is our Nebraska program manager. He can help you with. I can help you with as each project's being developed. So the buy-sell is really a billing mechanism. When you install a system on the buy-sell, you have 2 meters. So they're still measuring your consumption on the building as if it would be your consumption on the building. And then they're measuring the production of that solar energy. So you pay your normal price for the consumption on the building, and then you get paid for all the solar energy that is produced off of that system. And then you can financially offset all of that in your head. So these are the current rates for the NPPD buy-sell rider. And you'll see for the PV generation, the summer rate is 8.17 cents, which if you are on any other public power district, they're not gonna give you anything above avoided cost. Most of them have not been giving very good rates at all for PV generation. So this is something that's very unique to NPPD, and 8.17 cents is a really nice offset to your bill. And then during the winter, it's 5.12 cents per kilowatt hour. So as we're developing, and we're gonna go into a lot of detail later today on both the technical and the financial models for these buy-sell agreements, because there's a lot that's different than a normal community solar project. And because this is something that you're putting in as the city, you'll need to understand, and you're gonna be going through this process as well if you decide to do a buy-sell project. So we develop a 30-year cash flow. We'll do all the financial calculations for that project to make sure that as a city you're understanding what your paybacks are gonna be over that year. And when we were doing the Aurora project, this was something that with NPPD probably took about a year to get the right model developed as we were working through the rate structures and what the billing would actually look like. So it was something we did sit down with their team to make sure that everybody was on the same page and had the same understanding of how that worked. And so the way that the billing,
At the very end.
aha, there we go. So the way that the billing works is a credit to your bill. So, you know, as your bills are racking up and as you're producing more energy, there's just an adjustment on those bills. At any time, NPPD can choose to pay you in cash if they want to, but usually it's just gonna be a credit to that bill. Does anybody have any questions so far? I'm keeping this pretty brief on how this is set up because we're gonna go into so much detail later this afternoon. But it's pretty straightforward to me, but that's because I've done it, I've done it before.
Molly,
Yep.
how do those rates interact with the 5.8% or 5.8 cent?
They don't at all. So this is completely separate, its own financial billing mechanism.
Okay.
So that 5.8 just completely goes out the window for this type of project. And so that's all I wanted to say on the buy-sell so far, because we're going to be doing a lot of it later. And I think we're going to have David come up next and talk about some programs or groups.